So I moved into my living room, which means instead of having a drum line in the background, we have like a weird yellow lighting glare and then the occasional like airplane for the background noise. So I'm not really sure that's a huge step up. To reduce the glare, you can get like a whole bunch of forehead. I'm not super into that either. So anyway, I wanted to talk a little bit about the Hugo Awards and how I did that this year. It was my first time doing it, and I want to talk a little bit about it as like a book lover who tried something new. I I really enjoyed it in some ways, and the ways that I actually didn't enjoy it don't have anything to do with like, they're very personal, basically. And so I thought, okay, let me do a video on it, because if you are, a casual book person or just someone who is more of a reader than like an online book person, you may be like, oh, wait, what's that? That sounds cool. How do I do that? And if you're also like me, it's a little bit easier if someone explains it to you than trying to figure it out yourself. So the Hugo Awards are fan nominated, and basically you pay an amount to either you are like pay the full amount and then you're like a full member and then you can like go to the awards themselves, or you pay like a lesser amount and you're just a voter, which is what I did. And the reason I did it this year is because one of the authors was like, hey, my series is up for best series. And one of the things that you get when you vote is a packet. And she said, you get the whole series and all the novellas and short stories. And I was like, for $50? Yeah, because you get them all in ebook form. And I was like, that's a deal. And that's not like all you get. That was just what you got from her. And I was like, I haven't had to do like any sort of actual like reading that I said I would have to do. There's a phrase for that. It's getting late. I put off doing this until, well, my roommate went to bed because of the drumline thing. So I I was really excited to do it because I haven't done obligatory. I no. Eh. So I was really excited to do it. So I used to do committee reading when I was a librarian with a job. And I just, I did it for 2 years, and then I did some other stuff to help out before that. So I did it for like 2.5 years. And the thing about having to read is, reading a lot in a short period of time, is that you can get really, really overwhelmed, especially when you have a day job. But like the second year I did Rainbow, I had already left. Like I was already too sick and too everything, and reading was like a thing that I could do in like short bursts mostly. And so I was like, okay, cool. But even then I was completely overwhelmed. So I know my limits now. And I was like, hey, I can do this. I can like do the Hugos, no problem. So they sent the packet out in July, and then it was November. And because of the pandemic, I wasn't going to the library. And so I had a whole mess to read. And like, I read a lot, but I read, and I love sci-fi. Like, I love sci-fi, fantasy, well, some fantasy. And, but the thing is like, I have a lot of books left over from Rainbow. I have a lot of books left over from going to conferences, library conferences. The last library conference was in my like closest city. So, oh my gosh, I have so many books. Like literally, I probably have over 1,000 books here I haven't read. And that's after I gave a whole bunch of them away. And then when I'm done with them, I give like most of them away. and I still have so many left to read. And so I read like a lot of YA, I read, whatever. And so I get to the Hugo slate and I'm like, okay, I've read like 5 of these, maybe 6 over the course of the past year. And that's literally mostly because I just didn't have access to a library. And so I'm behind. I'm behind in contemporary reading. And I knew that. I knew I was. My focus for so long had been like queer books because of Rainbow. And that's queer YA and queer middle grade and picture books and stuff like that. But most of the stuff that I still had were the authors that I was following because of that. And yeah, so I had all this reading that I said I was going to do in like such a short period of time that when voting came up, I think it was like three left to do. Tired. And it was editor short form, editor long form, and semi-prozine. And I was like, you know what? I did the books, like the novels, the novelettes, the novellas, the short stories. I did all the fan stuff. I did the Astounding Award. I couldn't, I had like 2 days left, and I probably could have knocked out the semi-prozine thing. And I looked at it and I'm like, I'm tired, right? So, like, you don't have to do it. You don't have to. You can spend your $50 and just take the ebooks that they send you and the links to everything, and you can just walk away and be like, ha ha ha. But, why would you? It's a lot. Like, it's a whole lot. And they don't give you everything, right? It's like some stuff you get as excerpts, some of it you get as links. There was a video game category. I'm not even counting that as something I could possibly do because of I have emotion-based illness, so I can't play video games. I can play like a couple of like Sudoku-y, mobile-y games, and so yeah, that's kind of my limit. So there was no way I was going to do that. So that's not a category I can touch. Like, I couldn't even pretend. But I did watch all the movies. I had audio description on for most of them. And some of the categories are like way, way diverse. And I don't mean diverse like, oh, well, this author is from China. No, I mean like a translation of Beowulf going up against like a maybe 2 hours, 1.5 hour long video about BronyCon. Like, how do you compare those two things? You have to find a way to do so. You have to figure out, you have to assign meaning to that. That's your job as a voter. So it becomes this really interesting journey as a reader, because you read a couple of books, you put them in order of, because it's a ranking system, you put them in order of what's interesting to you or what's good to you. Simple, cool. But then you get to these categories where you're putting a podcast up against like a webzine or like an actual like paper looking zine, and then you're just like, wow. Or like art, how do you decide what makes a great artist? Which, visual art written, I'm sure that people could be like, well, there are things, right? But it's so personal. And I had a really tough time sometimes making decisions with who I wanted to vote for. Sometimes I put something down, and then at the last minute before I put my votes in, I switched a couple of things. Who's going to be mad at me? Me? No. The Hugos? They don't even know. They don't know what was on my spreadsheet. I do recommend having a spreadsheet if you decide to do this, though. Yeah, so I do recommend it. I don't necessarily recommend it if you're like me, who gets like guilt over being, a completionist, and then I failed, because I did have that sense that I failed, because that's who I am. I will guilt myself over everything in the whole wide world. And if you are already sort of tapped into that sci-fi culture of, reading a lot of these online story journals, and, you're already sort of ahead of the game, that helps. It really helps to know that. I wish that I had gone in having read more, but I wouldn't trade the things that I had read last year. I mean, it opened up. There are so many authors now who I wouldn't have gotten to for like another 3 to 5 years, because I would have focused on the books that are in my house, and I would have missed some really beautiful, fun, intense, stunning, just amazing books. And I have to say, every single slate had these just really fantastic works in them. It was the one thing that I was like really impressed with, was that with the exception of one book that I have some issues with, I really felt like I enjoyed everything. And if there was something that like I was just sort of whatever on, like if it was a short story or whatever, it wasn't because there wasn't like a worth or a weight to it. It was just because it wasn't for me personally. There was nothing on this year's nominee list, especially in the big categories, that didn't feel like it had earned its place there, except that one thing that I just don't get, and I'll never get it, and it doesn't matter. I keep asking people who loved it why, and they just can't. They can't, like, no matter, like, what they say to me doesn't make any sense. The answer is the one thing that just does not satisfy me. I'm never going to get there. Anyway, so if you have any questions about how everything goes down, you can check out the website. And if you want any sort of insider clarification, there's me, and I'm sure there's a bazillion other book people who would love to talk about it, but there's also me. I love to talk about it. And leave me a comment.